Most self-improvement advice assumes your problem is not knowing enough. It isn't. You know what you should do? The problem is the space between knowing and actually doing it, and why that space keeps winning. You felt it. Sunday night, full of intention. By Wednesday, the intention is still there, but somehow nothing is moved. Not because you're undisciplined. Because something in how you're operating is working against you without you realizing it. Here on Elingo, we're going to go through 5 rules that target that exact gap, not with motivation, but with a clearer understanding of how you actually function. Rule 1. Your comfort zone isn't neutral ground. It's a slow drain. Imagine a cost that never shows up as a single bill. It accumulates in small amounts daily, invisibly, until one day you add it up and the number is staggering. That's what avoiding discomfort does to a life. The common frame is wrong. People think of their comfort zone as a place where nothing bad happens. Safe, stable, restful. But neutrality is an illusion in a world that moves whether you do or not. Staying still isn't zero cost. It's a negative return compounding quietly. What makes this hard to see is that avoidance always feels like a rational decision in the moment. The conversation you postpone has a genuine reason attached to it. The project you haven't started has a legitimate concern keeping it waiting. Each individual act of avoidance makes sense. The pattern doesn't. Here's what the research on approach avoidance motivation shows. When we consistently choose avoidance, we don't just miss opportunities, we train the brain to treat avoidance as the default response to discomfort. The more you avoid, the lower the threshold for what triggers avoidance next time. It isn't a static habit. It's a shrinking one. The comfort zone doesn't stay the same size. It contracts every time you choose it over growth. What would you attempt if the cost of avoiding it were fully visible to you right now, not just in this moment, but across the next 5 years? Rule 2. Stop trying to fix your weaknesses. There's a question most performance reviews, school systems, and self-assessments share. What needs to improve? The implicit logic is that success is built by closing the gaps. Identify what's broken, repair it, become well-rounded. It's the wrong logic. Decades of research through Gallup's strengths-based studies found that people who build their careers around natural strengths outperform those who spend equivalent energy improving weaknesses, not marginally but significantly. The reason isn't surprising when you think about it. A weakness improved takes you from poor to average. A strength developed can take you from good to genuinely rare. Think about the last time something felt almost effortless, where you lost track of time and produced something you were proud of. That feeling isn't a coincidence. It's a signal. Your natural aptitudes, when trained deliberately, generate a return on effort that your weaknesses simply cannot match. This doesn't mean ignoring everything you're not good at. It means being strategic about where your primary energy goes. Most people do the opposite. They protect their strengths by doing them already and pour effort into the gaps. The allocation is backwards. Average in 10 things will always lose to exceptional in 1. The question worth sitting with, in the past month, how much of your best, most focused time went toward the thing you're actually built for versus the things you feel obligated to improve? Rule 3. Urgency is an emotion disguised as information. Your phone buzzes. A message arrives marked important. A colleague needs something now. And without thinking, you pivot. Whatever you were doing waits. The urgent thing gets handled. This happens dozens of times a day, and most people never question it because urgency feels like a valid signal. It feels like accurate information that something genuinely requires immediate attention. But urgency is mostly manufactured by notification systems engineered to create anxiety, by other people's timelines mistaken for your own, by a culture that treats response speed as a measure of competence. The most important work in almost any domain, the creative work, the strategic thinking, the decisions that actually shape where your life goes, almost never arrives feeling urgent. It arrives quietly. It has no alarm attached. It doesn't spike your cortisol. And because it doesn't create that physiological signal, it keeps getting displaced by things that do. Marcus Aurelius wrote something worth pausing on. Almost nothing that feels urgent actually is. What feels pressing is usually what's loudest, not what matters most. The Stoics built an entire practice around distinguishing between what demands your attention and what deserves it, because they knew these two categories almost never overlap. What feels most pressing is rarely what matters most. What matters most rarely feels pressing at all. Before you respond to the next thing that arrives as urgent, 10 seconds. Ask, urgent to whom and on whose timeline? That pause is the difference between living by your priorities and spending your life in service of everyone else's. Rule 4. The war you're losing is the one nobody can see. Picture a day where you didn't technically do much. You sat at your desk. You had the time. But by evening, you were exhausted in a way that felt disproportionate to what actually happened. That feeling has a cause. Roy Baumeister's research on ego depletion showed something that changes how you think about energy. Making decisions and resisting impulses draws from the same finite cognitive resource as focused work. And internal negotiation, the back and forth with yourself about whether to start, whether you're capable, whether it matters, whether to quit, counts as decision-making. Every morning you wake up with a certain amount of this resource. Every internal argument spends it. By the time you arrive at the work that actually matters, the tank is already lower than it looks. The highest leverage shift isn't more discipline. It's fewer negotiations. This means making decisions in advance, outside the moment, when you have perspective and the resistance hasn't arrived yet. It means committing clearly enough that when the moment of friction comes, there's nothing left to debate. Think about the recurring internal arguments in your week. The ones about whether to exercise today, whether to start that thing, whether to have that conversation. Each of those, even when you win them, costs something. The most exhausting battles you fight are the ones nobody else can see. Pick the 3 that drain you most. Make a decision about each one right now. Not in the moment when you'll be tired and looking for the exit, but now when you still have the clarity to choose well. Rule 5. Goals tell you where you want to go. Standards decide if you get there. Here's a pattern worth recognizing. Someone sets a meaningful goal and is genuinely excited about it. 6 months later, nothing has moved, and they're confused because the goal was real. The desire was real. So what happened? What happened is that the goal existed at the level of aspiration, while daily behavior continued operating at the level of existing standards. The goal sat at the top like a destination on a map. The standards, the baseline of what was actually acceptable on an ordinary Tuesday, never moved. Elena spent 2 years trying to build a writing practice. She tried streaks, accountability partners, apps, public commitments. Everything worked briefly and then collapsed. The shift came when a mentor asked her a different question. Not what she wanted to achieve, but what her minimum acceptable standard was on a bad day, when she was tired, when motivation was gone. She decided, 1 paragraph. Not one good paragraph. Just one. Every day, regardless of mood, regardless of quality. Not as a goal. As a floor she would not go below. Within 14 months, she had a completed manuscript. The goal had been the same for 2 years. The standard was new. The insight here runs counter to most productivity advice, which focuses on raising the ceiling. Raise your ambitions. Aim higher. But the ceiling doesn't determine outcomes. The floor does. Your floor, the minimum you'll accept from yourself in the absence of motivation or momentum, is what's actually running your life on most days. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards. Not the standards you announce. The ones you actually enforce, quietly, when no one is watching and there's nothing to prove. What these 5 rules share. Look at them together, and one thing becomes clear. The obstacle is almost never where you think it is. It's not in your schedule or your knowledge or your willpower. It's in the invisible mechanics of how you make decisions when no one's watching, where you allocate your best energy, what you're willing to negotiate away, and what floor you've quietly agreed to live on. None of these rules ask you to be harder on yourself. They ask you to be more honest. 6 months from now, you'll be somewhere. The question isn't whether things will change. Time changes things regardless. The question is whether the change will be directional. Life doesn't get better by wanting more. It gets better by tolerating less. So tonight, one question worth answering honestly. Which of these 5 rules are you most tempted to agree with intellectually, but least willing to actually apply? Because that's the one that matters most right now. Subscribe to Elingo if this kind of thinking is what you're looking for. There's more where this came from.